Basically, in the world today, everyone's walking around with a tracking device which can take pictures and upload it to the internet, your mobile phone, your cell phone, and there is a natural human, there's natural human behavior to record your experiences, whether that's pictures of fancy food, cats doing silly stuff, or extreme events. And so when those extreme events happen, a lot of people will run or will hide completely irrational actions, but a lot of people will pull out their phones and start recording.
How can we leverage technology to do a better job reporting the news? My guest today is Nick Waters with the investigative reporting group Bellingcat. The organization started on crowdsourced funding in 2014, and it's grown now to a staff of 20 professionals skilled in combing through digital data and using it to break big news stories.
Rather than these kind of events being filtered through witnesses, they're then filtered through journalism and then filtered through editors and written about. The kind of content that we work with allows the people to read our articles and then carry the geolocation for themselves if they like, and look at the sources that we use that upon which we have built our analysis.
Nick is a former British Army officer with an interest in cyber threat intelligence. Bellingcat's reporting linked the 2014 crash of the Malaysian airliner in Ukraine to a Russian missile, and more recently, the group investigated the storming of the U.S. Capitol, helping to preserve photos and videos of the crimes committed.
A big part of our methodology is being able to take these sources that we have, these videos, these images, and then show why they're relevant and how they fit into an event.
The president met with congressional leaders. Doctors will start implanting the devices.
And you heard that warning from the Coast Guard tonight.
For now, we're live in Orlando.
For now, we're live in Dallas. We're live in Boston tonight. Caitlin McCulley, 7 News 19.
I'm Caitlin McCulley. I left my job as a TV news reporter in a pandemic to try to find a better way to share stories that matter, no BS. Thanks for listening to Outlet Podcast. You can download new episodes each week. Here's Nick Waters.
I left the Army, British Army, in 2015. So I'd done a tour of Afghanistan, done 4 years in the Army, and I was kind of done with it. I wanted to do something else. So I went to study a master's at King's College London, where I met a guy called Christian Tribert and a guy called Aliam Leroy, both of whom were writing for Bellingcat at the time. And Christian was at the time working for Air Wars as well. And what Air Wars does is track airstrikes. Initially, at the time, coalition airstrikes in Syria and Iraq to identify where they are, what's happening, how many civilian casualties there are there. And I saw Christian watching this video of an airstrike on what turned out to be a bakery over and over again, and then looking at a map and switching between the two. And I just left the Army. I'm quite good with map reading and stuff like maps. So I went over to him and asked, what are you doing here? I might be able to help out. And it kind of really went from there. And my first piece of published work within Bellingcat was in 2016. Finished my master's, kept writing Bellingcat, worked in cyber threat intelligence for a couple of years, and then started working for Bellingcat full-time in the summer of 2018, where I've been ever since. So my experiences have ranged from the military to cyber threat intelligence or open source cyber threat intelligence to open source investigation on behalf of Bellingcat. Yeah.
And I've been seeing this term open source data, open source investigations. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so you'll come across, I think, slightly different definitions, but the definition that we use is any source that anybody can access. So even if it may cost a little bit of money to actually access it, you don't need to have any particular clearance. You don't need to be part of any particular group of people. You don't have to be part of particularly family or something in order to access that information. So it's any information that's accessible in that way.
So you're looking at social media, you're looking at anything that's been posted online and document dumps or that kind of thing.
Yeah, precisely. So we regard stuff like previously hacked documents or previously hacked databases as fair game. We wouldn't carry out the hacking ourselves, but if someone has put that database online, then we believe or we consider that open source, and so for us, it's fair game.
Okay, and so how is this different than other news organizations? Obviously, some things are pretty obvious, but how do you see that Bellingcat is different?
So firstly, it's more, if we're going to compare it, it's kind of closer to investigative journalism, but at the same time, the kind of mindset and culture is very different. Because these kind of open source groups really grew out of volunteers, of people who are just online and interested in these kind of events. You have a very different kind of attitude and culture. It's much more open, it's much more collaborative. You tend to find I tend to find with investigative journalists, it tends to be a lot, they tend to have their sources close to their chest for obvious reasons. A lot of their sources are human sources and they need to protect them. Whereas with the kind of journalism that we do, it's open sources, anyone can access that. I found that tweet, it doesn't mean that like nobody else can use that tweet. So it tends to be a lot more collaborative. You share information with other people, you talk to other people a lot more. And there's a real kind of, I don't know, like almost kind of collective experience there as well. I think for me, that's the primary difference between the two in terms of the kind of investigative journalism that we do compared to traditional journalism, I think.
And especially in an era when there is so much misinformation and disinformation circulating and so much distrust in what journalists are doing, it seems like transparency is really key.
Yeah, so a big part of our methodology is being able to take these sources that we have, these videos, these images, and then show why they're relevant and how they fit into an event as a whole. And being able to place them in time and in space using geolocation, using chronolocation, is an incredibly important part of methodology, and it ensures that we maintain the trust of the audience. And even if they don't trust us, they can still go through a methodology and say, actually, that video is that place where Bellingcat says it is, that does show that object which Bellingcat says it shows. So, actually, although it increases trust with the audience, the point of that methodology is that you don't actually have to trust us in order to agree with our conclusions.
Right. It's kind of a show your work methodology. You can see for yourself, you can check it out. And I think when we look at levels of trust in news organizations, local news always performs better in these studies because it's to some extent people can go out and verify it themselves. So this is a kind of a way to make international events somewhat accessible and people in a way for people to verify it themselves if they want to.
Yeah. I mean, you can, rather than these kind of events being filtered through witnesses, they're then filtered through journalism and then filtered through editors and written about. The kind of content that we work with allows the people to read our articles and then carry out the geolocation for themselves if they like, and look at the sources that we use that upon which we have built our analysis. So yeah, I think that is quite an important, part of it. It sometimes also means that it is relatively novel for some people. They don't necessarily understand where we're coming from because they don't fully understand that we're taking images and videos from the event itself, rather than kind of like asking journalists about what's happened, for example.
Yeah. Can you talk about some of the tactics you used? You mentioned geolocation, and what was the second term you used?
Chronolocation.
Okay, if you could break down some of that.
Sure. So chronolocation is the act of placing a piece of content, a video or an image in space. If you're a really good geolocator, you can sometimes work out where someone's standing or where an event took place to within like a few centimeters, which sometimes is incredibly important. So, for example, the shooting of Ashley Babbitt in the Capitol building. And chronolocation is the act of placing a piece of content in time. And once you have that kind of placing something in space and placing something in time, you've effectively isolated it. And you can therefore use that as either verification to say, this video does show what it purports to show, or say, actually, this video is from a totally different country from 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And being able to do that is really important because a lot of the time we're dealing with images or videos. We're not necessarily familiar with the people who have taken them. We don't understand the kind of motivations behind it. But by placing these videos in time and space, we can say, actually, this does show that particular event. And so therefore this video is relevant and you should pay attention to it.
And by getting multiple videos and multiple sources, does that help kind of build out a database? Yeah,
absolutely. So basically in the world today, everyone's walking around with a tracking device which can take pictures and upload it to the internet, your mobile phone, your cell phone. And there is a natural human, or there's natural human behavior to record your experiences, whether that's, pictures of fancy food, cats doing silly stuff, or extreme events. And so when those extreme events happen, a lot of people will run or will hide completely irrational actions, but a lot of people will pull out their phones and start recording. And it's not just like a voyeuristic behavior, it's also a drive to witness what is happening and show the world, hey, look, this is happening to me, to my family, to my people. And I think that's a really important source of information that we should be using in order to establish what is happening in the world around us. And when you have enough of it, you can recreate incredibly complex events like the storming of the Capitol building, like terrorist attacks, in much more granular detail than if you say simply talk to witnesses, because you'll have, you'll be able to place these kind of videos in time and space within a few centimeters and within a few seconds.
Mm-hmm. And I saw with the storming of the Capitol building, I was following your account on Twitter, and you guys had so many videos very quickly. I mean, it seemed like you were reacting at warp speed, cataloging all of these. And I know you were sending out a call for submissions as well. So if you could tell us how that process worked and what was going on behind the scenes.
Sure. So a big part of our work has been the use of the crowds. Again, this is how we differ from traditional investigative journalists. We're not afraid to say to everyone, hey, here's a task, we need your help. And when the Capitol happened, it became very, very evident very, very quickly that this was a really significant incident. And all our previous experience from Syria, from Yemen, shows that this kind of content frequently just disappears from the internet. A lot of the time, and we were shown to be correct, like at the Capitol, because people realized that it was incriminating, potentially incriminating as well. So what we did is we asked the crowd to just collect this information, collect these videos, collect these images that might be relevant, and input them into this data sheet. And because we've done this so much before, we already have like a really high engagement from our readers, from our followers. And that enabled us to be able to collect all this information so quickly. Obviously, it's produced some issues because you have so much information, and obviously there's replication and some of the data is bad and all that kind of stuff. But that's a much better problem to have than not having any of this information whatsoever, or trying to find all these videos and images now.
Mm-hmm. And how many people did you have working on this behind the scenes?
So it was, I suppose, myself, Elliot, who's the founder of Bellingcat, Giancarlo's really been leading the effort. A guy called Carlos, Robert Evans, so kind of, and Charlotte Goddard. So like 5 or 6 people who are really kind of working to collect that, or to facilitate those volunteers and collecting that kind of information. Since then, we've got a smaller group of volunteers who are now helping to kind of go through and clean that data. So altogether, the kind of team is I'd say probably 10 or 11 active participants, I think.
Okay.
And then obviously the crowd as well.
Yeah. Well, when people hear crowdsourced data or user-generated content, some of the criticism that comes up is, oh, well, people could just submit anything. They could submit fake videos. That, in actuality, how much of that did you see?
Not that much. I have my own kind of thing about this, which is slightly relevant in a different kind of context. Mm-hmm. Although there is the potential for a lot of this stuff to be useless content, the reality is the vast majority is not. Just as we've seen from kind of Syria, Yemen, the kind of videos that are emerging out of there, these aren't faked incidents. These are real. And you should definitely check and verify, but I think the default should be to say, hey, something caused this. What we saw a little bit was people trying to submit a deliberately disingenuous information, but that was reasonably easy to spot, or pretty easy to spot, because you don't just go off the information that people provide, you also check the videos themselves and check the data. There was one particular kind of like vandalism one of our sheets looking at the shooting of Ashley Babbitt when someone posted goatsy all over the sheet. Incidentally, an image that I haven't seen for far too long and I hope never to see again. But yeah, you do get that. But as long as you understand that and work to mitigate it and then work to verify the content that you have, then it is something that can pretty easily be mitigated.
Now, this may be an ignorant question, but I'm not used to dealing with the technical side of viewer submitted videos and photos. Is there data within the actual photo and video that you can tell the time it was taken or location where it was taken, that kind of thing?
So some of the videos, yes. So basically, we've done this several times now with these kind of big events. When you'll get like scores or hundreds of videos, you'll usually have live streams as well. And if those live streams are being posted to Facebook, for example, you can look at the Unicode, which has the time kind of burnt into it, or the time that stream started burnt into it. Or you even have like at the time you had a lot of news footage which had a time ticker in the corner. And so what you do is you take that footage, you place it in your timeline, and then you can look at a lot of these other images or videos which don't have that metadata, which maybe only last for like 30 seconds. But during that 30 seconds, they film a particular incident. Say a flashbang going off, or someone being hit over the head with a particular implement, and that becomes a temporal marker. And then when you align that with, or you can then align that video which doesn't have that time data with the videos that do. And from there, you can start to build out a timeline and place all these videos in their respective times and their respective places as well, because you can place them in space by looking at what details you see. So you start with the videos that do have that kind of data associated with them, and then move on to the ones that you don't.
Are you using any software to help you with this?
I'm using, I think it's time.graphics timeline, which has been pretty good. But no, not really. People quite frequently ask us, to what extent can stuff like this be automated? And a lot of it can. Like the collection, scraping, and so on. But the kind of, I would describe it as maybe the artisanal touch that we bring, I think adds a little bit of analytical ability that I think would otherwise be lost. So being able to, identify that patch of red pixels is actually that man's jacket, and that patch of blue pixels is that man's jacket. So therefore this video is at that time. I don't think that's something that could be automated at this point in time. So yeah, we still need human eyes on to establish certain events, really.
Got it. How has your experience in the British Army translated into this work you're doing now?
A lot. So some of the basic skills like map reading, for example, is analogous to geolocation. You're just kind of doing things in a slightly different order. So rather than, for example, me being in a valley in Kenya and looking up at the hill and going, oh, that's that hill on the map. I must be here on the map. I'm sitting at home in my office looking at the video and saying, okay, that hill in that video is that hill that I can see on that satellite image. Therefore, that video was taken there. It's very, very, very similar. Things like knowledge of weapons effects and particular weapons is very useful as well, especially for the work that we've done in Syria and Yemen. Being able to identify, that looks like a aerial bomb, that looks like some kind of rocket artillery. That stuff is incredibly useful when you're writing about those kind of events. And also, I think an understanding of like military culture and military processes, like, for example, targeting, has certainly been helpful too. So yeah, it's been very, very useful for what I do now.
Yeah, I was looking at a piece you did last week, or published last week, I believe, about an attack in Yemen at the airport, and you really broke down photo by photo and angles, and walk us through that process of how you were able to do that.
Sure. Yeah. So this regarding the attack on Aden Airport on I believe it was the 30th of December, where basically there were 3 long-range rockets landed at Aden Airport and almost killed this unity government that had just landed in Yemen. And basically, you could look at the size of the rockets. You could look at the shape of the crater to establish the direction that they were fired from. And then you could look at some of the footage which claimed to be from tears from Damar, where it was very clear that long-range rockets had been launched from those two locations. And when you looked at some of the fragments that purported to be from that attack, you can see that these appear to be long-range guided missiles, or at least one that crashed was appeared to be a long-range guided missile. And then you kind of put it all together, and you can establish that actually this appears to have been a almost incredibly successful attack likely by the Houthis in an attempt to destroy this unity government. That was really only fooled at the last minute because the plane had to move to a different landing bay. It was
wow.
came very, very close.
And was the fact that the plane moved to a different landing bay, was that by accident, or did somebody get wind of the attack?
No, that was because there were so many people on the actually on the tarmac at the airport. So it was actually another guy on the plane who got off in his personal security detail. He wasn't related to the cabinet, so he got off the plane first because he wanted to get out of the way. But his security detail actually forced or kind of occupied that first bay, so the plane had to park at the second bay. And at that first bay, they'd rolled out the red carpet. They had everything ready for it, and that was actually where one of the rockets landed. So the plane ended up being about 50 meters away from where that rocket landed, which saved, I think, the cabinet, who escaped without injury.
Wow. And the Houthis are still denying they had anything to do with this?
Yeah, the initial statement they released did deny it, which is, I think, relatively unusual. Like, the attack was carried out very well, to be honest, and it bears a few hallmarks of their ability. I mean, their use of timing, long range, their ability to strike at long range and very accurately is something they've been employing very effectively for like three years or so now. And they've done it quite a few times, again targeting usually very important like VIPs at military parades and so on. So yeah, they still haven't accepted responsibility as far as I'm aware, but I think the circumstances of the attack and the nature of the attack mean that I don't think there's a huge amount of doubt there.
This is a very big story, and one of many that you've done. I can imagine the time and effort that goes into producing something like this. How long do you spend to do this kind of work?
It varies. For something like the Aden attack, where the content is all quite available, I think I wrote most of it within kind of 4 or 5 days, or did the analysis and had written most of it within 4 or 5 days. And then it was a case of trying to find that one extra video. I think we found the images of the fragment, I think, quite a bit later on. Other investigations have taken quite a long time. So, for example, in the early days, looking at the shooting down of MH17 in Ukraine by the Russians, there were some geolocations showing, for example, Buk rocket launchers, the vehicle which fired the rocket which shot down MH17. There were geolocations that took something like 2 years to carry out because the quality of the picture is really low, and you don't necessarily have like all the contextual information allowing you to place that image in the space.
Sure.
So it varies significantly.
Yeah. And so how, without getting into too much detail, how is Bellingcat funded?
So we have it's primarily from charitable organizations. So at the moment our funders are Odysseum, National Endowment for Democracy, Dutch Postcode Lottery, Sandstorm TV, Singrid Rousing Trust, and Stitching Saxum Voltum. So basically the idea behind that is that we have a range of funders, because if any of them try to have any kind of influence over what we do, then we can basically tell them to do one, really. A lot of the kind of like initial funding or like the funding that kind of got us through the first kind of 3 years was crowdsourcing and from the Open Society Foundation. But yeah, it's primarily through charitable foundations, and we don't take direct government direct government funding, because we believe that would affect our ability to be impartial, or at least independent. Sorry, editorially independent.
And do you take ads? Do you incorporate advertisements?
Nope.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a very strange model, and it's kind of organically grown out of the fact that Bellingcat started as a Kickstarter project.
Yeah.
So it was never intended to be kind of making profit, and hence why we are actually now we're a Dutch charity. Everything that we do is audited. All our finances stuff are audited by the Dutch Commission. But yeah, so we have a very, very strange model in terms of our financial model.
And this is your job. You don't have another job.
No. For the first few years I did. So after 2016, the crowdfunding was primarily used for like very, very specific projects, like flying people to workshops to do training, or to run training, and Elliot's salary, because he was one who was running Bellingcat, but pretty much everyone else was a volunteer. So for like 2-3 years, I was writing Bellingcat articles, or I'd go to work, do my work for like 8-9 hours, and then come back and then work another like 3 hours doing this kind of stuff. And it's been a pretty incredible last 3 years to be able to see it going from this crowdsourced entity to something where we are employing professionals, we are testifying in court, or testing the viability of this kind of information in mock trials. So it's been pretty awesome to go from one to the other. Although we're kind of been using this for this kind of information for journalistic purposes, we are trying to work to use this information in courts. So you can understand that kind of a video where you've no idea who filmed it can be quite difficult to submit as evidence. All of our work, especially related to Yemen, has been to try and take that information and turn it into information that can be then used as evidence in court. So It's not just like the journalistic aspect, there's also an accountability aspect there that we think is quite important, but doesn't always quite get so much spotlight.
What hurdles are you facing with that?
Primarily the novelty value. If you take a picture from a camera and you present it in court with the photographer, and the photographer says, I took this picture at this time, I can prove it using the metadata, that's pretty normal. If you take a picture that someone posted on Twitter that has been posted to WhatsApp or Telegram groups and then reposted by somebody else and reposted by another person, so you don't know who took it. If I then walk into the courtroom and start showing them like Google Maps and shadow analysis, talking about using people as sundials, they'd probably find that quite confusing. So we've been working with lawyers to turn that kind of information, that kind of analysis, into a
methodology.
Methodology, and then a way it can be used in court and understood by lawyers and by judges who may not necessarily be extremely online like all of us.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, Nick, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and best of luck to you.
Of course, Kathleen. Cheers, Kathleen. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.